Hello, my name is Victor Öhman, and in this video I'll be showing you how I created this wheat field with animated wind rolling across it. The wheat is from Megascans, and I'll show you how I set everything up, from texture to final render. This example is more focused on visualization or fine render than game graphics, so I'm not too worried about the performance. However, with some minor optimizations it could easily be used in games as well. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the Megascans site and go into the library. And we want to search for atlases, which are textures containing textures with opacity, such as plants, twigs, branches, leaves, and so on. So in here we're going to search for wheat. And the first two results here are pretty much perfect for, or they are perfect for what we're going to do. So I'll just open this up. Make sure it's 1024 because that's going to be enough for this project. Real-time specular and roughness. And I want the albedo, the normal, roughness, translucency, and opacity. I don't need the specular or displacement. So download, just make a new folder here, call this tutorial, open that up and save it. And I'm going to do the same thing for the second one. So download and save. I'll just show in folder and I'll extract them. So there's one big thing I need to do here before we can use this, and that is to remove a big chunk of the opacity down here. So I'll just make a square selection, fill this with white, and save it. I'll do the same thing for the other one as well. And the reason for doing this is because the meshes or assets are going to be very, very tightly packed. So you're really only going to see this part up here. Except of course for the ones right at the edge, but you can just cover those up with versions that don't have the filled white space. So up here is the only place where you're gonna get the overdraw, and down here it's not gonna be overdraw, so it's gonna be a lot cheaper. So I'll go ahead and open up Maya, and I'll create the actual mesh that's gonna be using these materials or these textures. So I'll just select this and rotate it. And rotate it on this axis as well. Make sure it's nice and even there. And I'll make a new material. Make a Lambert. And I'll assign the albedo. So let's go into the tutorial. Choose the first one, albedo. And I'll apply the opacity map in the transparency slot here. And that is enough for us to work with for now. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'll remove any excess parts that don't contain any texture information to reduce overdraw. And I'm not going to be going too overkill on the matching, because you have to find a sweet spot between try count and overdraw. And too many triangles is, well, they're not free either. So finding a nice middle ground, just roughly following the shape here. So go up here and remove this corner, and I'll go down here and remove this part here. Something like that. And I'll just go ahead and make this topology a little bit cleaner, and I'll go in and add some cuts here to make some variations in the shape. Move this backwards, and I'll move this upwards. There we go. And I'll do the same thing for the other texture as well. Alright, so here we are in Unreal, and I've imported my material or my meshes, or my mesh actually, because I exported them as one FBX file. So I'll just name this wheat2 here, and I'll assign just a standard material to it so you can see how it looks in Engine. As you can see here, we have two slots for the two different textures. You could combine those into one atlas if you wanted to, but for the sake of speed, I just chose two materials. So here we go. Here's the mesh. and they sort of intersect, and that's to add some shape to it. And that's pretty much it. So next up, we're gonna create a terrain, and it's gonna be extremely simple. Just do a 31 times 31 quads. There's a pretty big area. I'll hit create, and we're going to do some slight height variations. It's not gonna be a masterpiece, but I just want some sort of variations so we can see the effect of the rolling hills and the wind and so on. So I want the back to be a little bit higher than the front, and I'm gonna go into the sculpting tool selection and hit smooth. I'll also increase the brush size to around 5,000. Whoops, not 50,000. There we go. I'll just smooth this out. Right, so let's take a look at the material before we add the actual wheat. So here is the material that I've already prepared, and as you can see, it's quite simple actually. We have the albedo up here, which consists of some nodes here where I can control the tint, the intensity, which is clamped by just a 0 to 1 clamp. Down here is normal with a regular normal intensity parameter here. Translucency, same thing here. Tint and int, I like to work with those. And we have the specular, roughness, and opacity. And as you can see here, we use the blocked off sort of opacity here. And here is the interesting part. Here's where the animation is happening. So up here we have just a simple grass wind. This is added with the rolling wind effect that I have going on here, and that is also very, very simple. The main component here is the noise node, which is animated. And what I've done is I've set it to a really, really, really low scale because it's a really large scale scene. And I set the levels to 2, turned off turbulence, and that's pretty much all the changes I did here. And what I do here to make this animate is I'm multiplying a time node. You can see the parameters here, or settings here, with a wind direction. This can be edited in the instances of the material as well, since it's made converted to a parameter. Next, I add absolute world position, including material shader, and I added this to the position of the noise. I then multiply this by a parameter, which I call wind large intensity, or wind large int. It's nice to have this because like in my case, I really wanted to exaggerate the wind. And I then use this to add to the specular. I add it to the roughness as well. I invert it first, and then I also add it to the albedo. So I'll just give you a moment here to check out the nodes. And for the material properties, I set it to a masked blend mode, two-sided foliage, and that's pretty much it. So let's close this down. And what I've done is I've made 2 instances. Just right-click and create material instance, and I've assigned the different textures to their respective materials, like that. So if we check out the mesh here with materials assigned, it looks pretty weird. That's because the scale is just way off in this in this previewer. But once out in the world, it's gonna look awesome. So what I'll do is I'll select this mesh here, I'll drop it in the foliage window, and I will start painting. So we can notice that it's a really, really low scale. So I'll just wager around that we multiplied around between 8 to 12. And also to look a bit better, I'm gonna select the light source here. I'll increase the intensity to around 8. And I'll also add a skylight to get some softer lighting going on. Right, so let's go back into the foliage and let's hope the scale is correct this time. And that looks perfect. Awesome. So I'll just go ahead and paint out the vegetation. And I'm noticing the density looks a little off. So I'll just scroll up here and set it to 400 instead. So paint over what I just painted. You can, of course, use a lower density. You can reduce the poly count. You can use a lower texture resolution, cut off more of the opacity map, or you could just make a smaller area in which to use this effect. So I'm pretty happy with this. So let's go in here. Let's tweak the lighting a little bit because we pretty much already got the result we were after. I'll just rotate this around, set it something like this. Maximize the viewport. And there we go. And what I did in the scene that you saw in the beginning was I just went in and set the brush size to a bit smaller size, and I painted in some tracks here from the tractors and so on. I can make it a bit bigger just to make it a bit more easy to see. I'll just go in here and make some lines in the field, and I'm gonna have it turn off to the right here. Just make sure it's the spacing doesn't mess it up, and I'll do one more track. The scale, of course, can be more mathematically correct, but for this example I am just gonna eyeball it. Same thing here, just go back to make sure everything is deleted. And there we go. So I can increase the intensity of the light here, maybe 12. There we go. And I can add a post-process volume here, make sure it's unbound. And I'll go into the auto exposure. I'll set the minimum brightness to 1 and the max brightness to 1. And I'll also set the low percentage to 100 and the high percentage to 100. And there we go. As you can see, it was super easy to set up, and this can be applied to any sort of grass or weeds or other types of crops. And yeah, I really hope you learned something from this video, and thank you so much for watching.